First Contact Protocol. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of the research vessel Stellar Horizon, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched the bioluminescent display below. The atmosphere of HT 827 swirled with patches of light that pulsed in what seemed like deliberate patterns, blues and greens dancing against the planet's perpetual twilight. Dr. Chen, you might want to see this, called Dr. James Rodriguez from his station at the spectrographic analyzer. These light patterns, they're not random. There's a mathematical sequence here. Sarah moved swiftly to his station, her heart racing. After 15 years of studying exobiology, she might have just stumbled upon what everyone dreamed of but few ever found: evidence of intelligent life. The holographic display showed wave after wave of light signatures, each perfectly timed and structured. "It's like watching a conversation," she whispered, "but we're only seeing one side of it." The ship's AI, Araya, chimed in. Analysis complete. Pattern matches criteria for artificial intelligence with 99.7% certainty. Recommended course of action: initiate first contact protocol. Captain Maya Patel's voice crackled over the intercom. All senior staff to the bridge. Immediately. In the bridge's conference room, Sarah faced the skeptical stares of her colleagues. Captain Patel, a veteran of 3 deep space missions, stood at the head of the table, her dark eyes intense. "Dr. Chen, you're telling me these lights are sentient beings?" "Not exactly, Captain," Sarah replied, pulling up the holographic data. "They're more like messages. The beings producing them must live somewhere below the atmosphere. What we're seeing is their equivalent of satellite communications." Dr. Rodriguez nodded, adding, "The mathematical complexity suggests a civilization at least as advanced as ours, possibly more so." "And you want to attempt contact?" Captain Patel's voice carried a note of concern. "We have to," Sarah insisted. "This could be the greatest discovery in human history. But more importantly, look at this." She highlighted a particular sequence. "These patterns have changed since we arrived. They know we're here, and they're trying to talk to us." The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. The science team worked to modify the ship's external lights to replicate the aliens' patterns, while engineering crafted specialized probes that could withstand the planet's dense atmosphere. Sarah sat at her station, running simulation after simulation. The patterns seemed to follow rules similar to Earth's own mathematical principles. The universal language of physics didn't play favorites. "First probe launching in 3 minutes," announced the ship's eye. Sarah watched as the sleek probe descended into the atmosphere, its modified lights pulsing in what they hoped was a simple greeting, a representation of the first 10 prime numbers. The response came faster than anyone expected. The entire atmosphere below them lit up in a spectacular display of synchronized lights, forming complex geometric patterns that spiraled outward from where the probe had descended. "AI analysis," Sarah called out, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. "Pattern contains embedded mathematical responses. They're teaching us their language, Dr. Chen." The bridge erupted in excited chatter as data streams poured in. The aliens weren't just responding. They were actively helping them understand their communication system. "Look at this," Dr. Rodriguez pointed to a new pattern emerging. "They're sending us coordinates. I think they're inviting us down." Captain Patel stepped forward, her expression both cautious and intrigued. "Dr. Chen, you've studied every first contact protocol in the book. What's your assessment?" Sarah took a deep breath, studying the continuing light show below. "They could have ignored us or shown hostility. Instead, they're teaching us how to talk to them. Everything about their behavior suggests a species that values knowledge and peaceful communication." "That's not a full assessment, Doctor," Captain Patel pressed. "No, it's not," Sarah admitted. "But sometimes the greatest discoveries require calculated risks. We came out here to find new life and new civilizations. They're reaching out to us. We owe it to humanity. And to them." to reach back. Captain Patel nodded slowly. Prepare the deep atmosphere shuttle. Dr. Chen, you'll lead the contact team. Choose your crew carefully. We only get one shot at a first impression. As Sarah began selecting her team members, she couldn't help but smile. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. Now it was happening, not with radio signals from distant stars or mysterious artifacts, but with a light show that put Earth's auroras to shame. Dr. Chen, ARI interrupted her thoughts. I've completed the initial analysis of their mathematical responses. There's something else hidden in the patterns, something that suggests their entire civilization might be based on principles we've never encountered before. Sarah's smile widened. This wasn't just first contact. This was the beginning of a whole new understanding of what life could be. Well, she said, checking the atmospheric suit's readouts one last time, let's go introduce ourselves to the neighbors. The translation matrix. The deep atmosphere shuttle descended through layers of bioluminescent signals, each pulse of light seeming to guide them downward like a cosmic landing system. Sarah Chen sat in the co-pilot's seat, recording every pattern, while Lieutenant Kira Patel, the captain's daughter and their pilot, navigated through the dense atmosphere. These patterns are getting more complex, Dr. Rodriguez noted from his station, eyes fixed on his holographic displays. It's like they're building up to something. The third member of their team, Dr. HFY, a quantum computing specialist, worked furiously at her terminal. The mathematical progression is unlike anything in our databases. Each sequence builds on the last in ways that shouldn't be possible with standard physics. The shuttle broke through the final layer of clouds, revealing a landscape that left them speechless. Massive crystalline structures rose from the surface, each one pulsing with internal light that synchronized with the patterns above. The structures weren't buildings in any conventional sense. They were more like living circuits, with energy and information flowing through them in visible streams. Landing zone identified, Kira announced, her trained composure slipping slightly as she took in the alien vista. Those lights at the base of the nearest structure, they're forming a landing pad configuration. Sarah checked her atmospheric suit's seals one final time as they touched down. The planet's surface gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, and the atmosphere was rich in noble gases that created the perfect medium for light-based communication. Remember, Sarah addressed her team, we're here to learn their language first. No assumptions, no rushed conclusions. Let them guide the interaction. As they stepped out of the shuttle, the ground beneath their feet began to pulse with light, creating ripples that spread outward from each step. The nearest crystalline structure responded, its entire surface shifting into new patterns. "ARIA, are you getting this?" Sarah spoke into her comm. "Affirmative, Dr. Chen." The patterns appear to be a form of neural network. The entire planet's surface might be one vast computing system. Movement caught their attention. From the base of the crystal structure, something emerged, or rather, assembled itself. Points of light gathered and condensed, forming a roughly humanoid shape made entirely of coherent energy and light. "Incredible," Dr. Hassan whispered. "They're photonic beings. Their entire civilization exists as organized light and energy." The light being approached them, its form rippling with patterns that matched the mathematical sequences they'd observed from orbit. Sarah stepped forward, activating the modified light panels they'd installed in their suits. She began with the simple prime number sequence they'd used before, but this time added a new element, a mathematical representation of DNA's double helix structure. It was humanity's signature, their way of saying, "This is what we are." The response was immediate and stunning. The being's form expanded, projecting a three-dimensional light structure that perfectly mimicked their DNA diagram, but then transformed it, showing how it would appear in their own photonic biology. They're not just communicating, Rodriguez realized. They're showing us parallel evolution. Different mediums, same basic principles of self-organization. Dr. Hassan's quantum computer began processing the incoming data streams. the mathematical language they're using. It's based on quantum entanglement principles. Each light pattern is actually a complex quantum equation. Over the next several hours, they established a basic translation matrix. The beings, who communicated that they called themselves the Lumini, existed in a state between energy and matter. Their consciousness spread across vast networks of quantum-entangled photons. Look at this. Sarah pointed to a new pattern emerging from their hosts. They're showing us how they evolved. Their star's unique radiation allowed them to develop as conscious light forms, using the planet's crystal structures as both habitat and memory storage. But as they delved deeper into the translation, Sarah noticed something concerning. Certain patterns from the Lumini carried a sense of urgency, an acceleration in their mathematical rhythm that reminded her of anxiety. Dr. Hassan, she called, run a spectral analysis of their star. Something's not right. The results confirmed her fears. The star was showing early signs of instability. Nothing immediate, but in a few centuries, its changing radiation patterns would begin to disrupt the delicate quantum fields that allowed the Lumini to exist. They didn't invite us down just to say hello, Sarah realized. They've been searching for someone who could understand them because they need help. Their entire civilization is facing an existential threat. As if confirming her conclusion, the Lumini being before them projected a series of images. Their star's deterioration, the potential collapse of their quantum networks, and finally, a question written in pure mathematics. Could humanity help them find a way to survive? Sarah looked at her team, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she felt. This wasn't just about first contact anymore. This was about saving an entire civilization of beings who had evolved to become living light. Aria, she called to the ship's eye. We're going to need every quantum physicist and stellar engineer in the fleet. Tell Captain Patel to prepare for a long-term mission. The real work is just beginning. The Lumini's form brightened, their pattern speaking of hope and gratitude. Humanity had come seeking new life among the stars, but they'd found something far more profound. A chance to prove that intelligence and compassion could bridge even the gap between matter and light itself. Cultural exchange. 3 weeks into the mission, the Stellar Horizons main laboratory had been transformed. Quantum computers hummed alongside crystalline structures donated by the Lumini, creating a hybrid workspace where two radically different species worked to understand each other. Sarah stood before a holographic display showing the latest simulation of the Lumini's quantum consciousness network. Next to her, a Lumini being they'd named Aurora, though their actual name was a complex pattern of entangled photons, pulsed with thoughtful patterns. The problem isn't just the star's radiation, Dr. Hassan explained, manipulating the hologram. It's the cascade effect. When the radiation changes, it'll disrupt the quantum fields that allow the Lumini to maintain their conscious networks. They'll essentially, she hesitated, fragment. Aurora completed through their newly refined translation matrix. Their light form flickered in what they'd learned was an expression of sorrow. Our thoughts will scatter like starlight through a broken prism. Sarah watched as human and Lumini scientists worked side by side throughout the lab. The Lumini had shared their understanding of quantum physics, revealing principles that human science had only theorized about. In return, humanity had offered its experience with material engineering and stellar mechanics. What if we could shield them? Lieutenant Kira Patel suggested, joining the discussion. Create some kind of quantum field generator. The energy requirements would be astronomical, Dr. Rodriguez replied, but his fingers were already flying over his console, running calculations. Although Aurora brightened suddenly, their patterns shifting rapidly. Through the translation matrix came excitement. Your fusion technology. It operates on principles similar to our star's current radiation pattern. The laboratory erupted in a flurry of activity as both species recognized the potential breakthrough. Human fusion reactors, modified with Lumini quantum principles, might be able to generate the exact type of radiation field needed to sustain their consciousness. But as Sarah studied the preliminary calculations, she noticed something that made her heart sink: the power requirements. We'd need hundreds of fusion reactors. Even if we could build them, the resources required would be. "We may have a solution," Aurora interrupted, their form expanding to project a complex mathematical equation into the air. "Our crystal structures. They're not just habitats. They're natural fusion reactors." Dr. Hassan's eyes widened as she processed the implications. "You're saying we could modify your existing structures to generate the required radiation field? Turn your entire civilization into a self-sustaining quantum environment?" "Yes," Aurora pulsed. "But we lack the material science to modify the crystals properly. This is why we sought contact. We needed beings who understand the manipulation of matter itself." The next few days became a blur of cultural and scientific exchange. As humans taught the Lumini about metallurgy and crystal manipulation, the Lumini shared insights into consciousness and quantum reality that revolutionized human understanding of the universe. Sarah found herself working alongside Aurora, learning that despite their alien nature, the Lumini shared many human traits: curiosity, compassion, and a deep appreciation for beauty. They shared their art, sculptures made of living light that told stories through quantum entanglement, and marveled at human music, which they experienced as complex wave patterns similar to their own communication. "Your species fights entropy with such determination," Aurora observed one evening as they reviewed the latest modifications to their crystal habitat. "Even though you are bound by matter, you refuse to accept limitations." Sarah smiled. "And your species shows us that consciousness isn't bound by organic chemistry. Together, we're rewriting what's possible." But their progress was interrupted by an urgent alert from the ship's sensors. Captain Patel's voice came over the intercom. "Dr. Chen, we're detecting increased instability in the star. The timeline has accelerated. We don't have centuries. We have months." The laboratory fell silent as both species absorbed the news. The Lumini's light patterns dimmed in what humans now recognized as fear. Everything they'd worked for suddenly faced a much tighter deadline. Sarah looked around the lab, seeing the determination in both human and Lumini faces. "Then we work faster," she declared. "We've already proven that our species can accomplish more together than either could alone. Now we just need to prove we can do it under pressure." Aurora brightened, their patterns showing agreement. "In our history, we have a concept translated roughly as light binding, when multiple consciences join to solve problems too complex for one alone. Perhaps it is time for a light binding between our species." The concept sparked an idea in Sarah's mind. If they could somehow combine human industrial efficiency with Lumini quantum manipulation. "Araya," she called out, "run a new simulation. What if we treated the entire project as one massive quantum computer, with human and Lumini consciousness working in parallel?" As the AI began its calculations, Sarah felt a growing sense of hope. The disaster heading their way wasn't just a threat. It was an opportunity to prove that intelligence and cooperation could overcome even the most fundamental challenges of physics itself. The race against time had begun, but they would face it together, matter and light working as one to save a civilization, and forge a partnership that would change both species forever. Crisis point. The star's corona flared again, sending waves of disruptive radiation through HD 827C's atmosphere. Inside the primary crystal structure, Sarah Chen watched as status displays flickered with warning signals. The Lumini's quantum network was already showing signs of strain, their conscious patterns requiring more energy to maintain coherence. "Status report." Captain Patel's voice crackled through the comm system. "Steady despite the crisis. Phase 1 of crystal modification is at 87%. Dr. Hassan responded, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. "But the star's deterioration is accelerating faster than our models predicted." Around them, the massive crystal chamber hummed with activity. Human engineers worked alongside Lumini consciousness clusters, modifying the ancient crystal matrices that served as both home and substrate for the photonic beings. The chamber itself pulsed with emergency patterns, the lumini equivalent of warning lights. Aurora manifested beside Sarah, their form flickering more than usual. We're losing coherence in the outer districts. Several thousand consciousness clusters have already needed to merge to maintain stability. Sarah felt her heart sink. They'd known this was coming, but the reality was still devastating. When lumini merged to preserve themselves, they lost parts of their individual identities. It was survival, but at a terrible cost. Dr. Chen, Dr. Rodriguez called from his station. The quantum simulations are complete. We have a problem. The holographic display told the story. Even with the modified crystals, even with human fusion technology integrated into the lumini systems, they couldn't generate a strong enough quantum field to protect the entire civilization. The numbers simply didn't add up. There has to be a way, Sarah muttered, staring at the equations floating before her. We're missing something. Aurora's form pulsed thoughtfully. Perhaps we are thinking too much like separate species. You once told me that human consciousness creates new solutions by connecting seemingly unrelated concepts. Neural networking, Dr. Hassan suddenly exclaimed. We're trying to create one massive shield, but what if instead we created a network of smaller interconnected fields? Sarah finished, seeing where the idea led. Like neurons in a brain, or like the way our consciousness naturally forms patterns, Aurora completed, their light brightening with excitement. The concept was audacious. Instead of fighting against the lumini's tendency to form consciousness clusters, they would use that very principle to save them. Each crystal structure would generate its own quantum field, linked together through principles of quantum entanglement that the lumini naturally used for communication. "RIA," Sarah called out. Run a new simulation using the neural network model. Factor in the natural quantum entanglement patterns of lumini consciousness. The AI's response was almost immediate. Simulation complete. Model shows 93% probability of success, but the AI hesitated. Implementation will require precise synchronization between all crystal structures. Even a microsecond of misalignment could collapse the entire network. The synchronization would need to be perfect, Dr. Hassan noted, studying the data. More perfect than any computer could manage. Aurora's form expanded, sharing the insight with nearby lumini. Not any computer, they pulsed, but perhaps a combined consciousness could achieve it. Sarah understood immediately. A true light binding between all of us, humans, lumini, and AI working as one consciousness for just long enough to establish the network. Captain Patel's voice cut in. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting we link human minds with the lumini consciousness network? The risks are less than the risk of doing nothing. Sarah completed. Captain, this isn't just about saving the lumini anymore. What we learn here could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. The next hours were a blur of preparation. The human team was fitted with modified neural interfaces, designed to translate their brain patterns into quantum states compatible with lumini consciousness. Aria's core processes were transferred to a crystal matrix, allowing the AI to serve as a bridge between organic and photonic minds. As the star above them continued to deteriorate, Sarah stood in the central chamber, surrounded by her team and dozens of lumini beings. The neural interface hummed against her temple. Remember, she addressed the gathered humans. This isn't about losing ourselves. It's about expanding what we are, just for a moment, to accomplish something extraordinary. Aurora's form merged with several other lumini, creating a bright network of interconnected light patterns. We are ready. The light binding awaits. Aria, Sarah called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Initiate consciousness synchronization on my mark. The chamber filled with a soft hum as human technology and lumini quantum fields began to align. Sarah took one last look at her team. Scientists, engineers, and explorers who had come seeking knowledge and found themselves on the verge of transcendence. Mark. The world dissolved into light. Bridge between worlds. Consciousness returned to Sarah Chen like waves lapping at a shore. First came sensation, the steady hum of crystal matrices, the subtle vibration of quantum fields. Then awareness expanded, memories of both self and other flowing together, like tributaries joining a vast river. The light binding had worked. For 7 crucial minutes, human and Lumini consciousness had merged completely, guided by Aria's quantum-enhanced processing power. In that eternal moment, they had succeeded in synchronizing the neural network of quantum fields, creating a protective mesh around the entire planet. Status report. Sarah managed, her voice hoarse as if she'd been screaming. But she hadn't been. She'd been everywhere, experiencing existence as pure light and energy. Quantum field network is stable, Dr. Hassan responded, her own voice trembling with lingering awe. All crystal structures are synchronized. The Lumini consciousness patterns are. They're actually stronger than before. Around them, the chamber blazed with light as Lumini beings manifested, their patterns more complex and vibrant than ever before. Aurora appeared beside Sarah, but they were different now, their form incorporating subtle traces of human neural patterns. "We are changed," Aurora said through the translation matrix, though Sarah found she could almost understand their light patterns directly now. "All of us are changed." Dr. Rodriguez's instruments confirmed it. The brief merger of consciousness had left lasting alterations in both species. Human brains showed new neural pathways that processed quantum information, while Lumini consciousness patterns now exhibited structures reminiscent of human thought processes. The star's radiation, Captain Patel's voice came through. "How are we looking?" Sarah turned to the monitoring stations. The quantum field network wasn't just protecting the Lumini. It was actually stabilizing the star's radiation output, using principles of quantum entanglement that only a merged consciousness could have conceived. "It's working better than we hoped," Sarah replied. "The network is self-sustaining and adaptive. As the star changes, the quantum fields adjust automatically, using the combined insights of both our species." But the true implications of what they'd achieved were still unfolding. In the days that followed, both humans and Lumini discovered they could partially access the shared state they'd experienced during the light binding. It wasn't the complete merger they'd undergone, but rather a new form of communication and understanding. "It's like having an extra sense," Dr. Hassan explained during a conference call with Earth's Scientific Council. "We can perceive quantum states directly now, while the Lumini have gained new insights into physical matter and linear time." The council was understandably both excited and concerned. The possibility of expanding human consciousness was revolutionary, but the implications were enormous. Would this change spread to other humans who came in contact with the modified team? Was humanity ready for such an evolutionary leap? Aurora pulsed with what Sarah now recognized as amusement. "Your council fears change, yet change is the only constant in the universe. Look at what we achieved together. Not just survival, but transcendence." Sarah stood at the observation window, watching the quantum fields shimmer in the atmosphere above. The view was different now. She could see the intricate patterns of consciousness flowing through the crystal structures, the complex dance of energy and information that made up Lumini society. "We're establishing a permanent research station," Captain Patel announced during the final briefing. "The Council has approved an ongoing cultural exchange program. We have too much to learn from each other to walk away now." The implications went far beyond scientific knowledge. The Lumini's understanding of quantum consciousness opened new possibilities for human AI development, while human expertise in physical engineering was already helping the Lumini explore new forms of expression and existence. "There's something else," Sarah added, sharing a meaningful look with Aurora. "The quantum field network we created, it could be adapted to facilitate faster-than-light communication, possibly even travel." The chamber filled with excited light patterns from the Lumini. The idea of physically exploring the galaxy had never been possible for them before. Now, with human spacecraft technology combined with their quantum consciousness principles, the stars themselves were within reach. Perhaps that is why space is so vast. Aurora mused, their form shimmering with contemplation. Not to keep species apart, but to ensure they must grow and change in order to cross it. As Sarah prepared to board the shuttle that would take her to the new research station, her home for the foreseeable future, she reflected on how far they'd come. They had arrived hoping to study an alien species, and instead had discovered a new definition of what it meant to be conscious beings. The star above pulsed steadily, its radiation now part of the symphony of quantum fields that protected and sustained the Lumini. But it was more than just a shield. It was a testament to what different species could achieve together. A bridge between matter and energy, between individual and collective, between what was and what could be. Ready for the next chapter? Aurora asked, their light patterns expressing both excitement and friendship. Sarah smiled, feeling the quantum awareness humming at the edges of her consciousness, a gift from the light binding that would forever remind her of the moment when two species had reached across the divide of physics itself to help each other evolve. Ready, she replied. Let's see what else is possible when we work together. The crystal structures pulsed with light around them, a chorus of human and Lumini consciousness singing together in the language of quantum harmony as they prepared to write the next chapter in the story of both their species.